All right, welcome to the conversation on the Young Turks. Great guest for you guys, Naomi Prince. She is a former managing director at Goldman Sachs, but don't worry, she's a good guy. She's been on the Young Turks many times, one of the top experts in the country on these financial issues in the Federal Reserve. She's written Collusion, How Central Bankers Rig the World, and It Takes a Pillage. Naomi, great to have you back on. Who is benefiting the most from these bailouts so far? Big business or small business?
Definitely big business on the win for themselves versus smaller businesses and individuals. And they've had help by the bailouts that have been structured through the stimulus packages from Congress, as well as from the Federal Reserve, as well as from the Treasury Department, i.e. Steve Mnuchin, former foreclosure king and Goldman Sachs partner, who is in the middle of all of that, having negotiated, I think, a really, really sweet deal for Wall Street banks, for major corporations, but particularly for Wall Street banks, actually, even though, they should be lending out money anyway because that's their job. But they're actually getting propped up by multiple different ways from the Federal Reserve, the Treasury Department, i.e. the taxpayer, and even the stimulus package.
Why the banks? Why is it going to the banks?
So there is a portion going to small businesses, but it's going through bank portals, right? So banks get allocated money from the SBA loan program, and they then parcel it out to, first and foremost, their ongoing clients. So, for example, JP Morgan Chase, Citigroup, Bank of America, even Wells Fargo, and they have ongoing relationships with people, loans that they've given them, say, in the past. And based on them already being clients, they sort of get an easier treatment in terms of getting SBA loans. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing because these are individuals who could use those loans and may get those loans. But the process is really mired in red tape. And having that relationship to begin with means that the people that don't have a relationship to begin with the bank from whom they've already gotten loans has a much harder time getting a chunk of those loans. But there's more to that. On the other side of the actual loans, which was about a $260 billion out of a $2.2 trillion stimulus package, there's what the Fed did most recently, which is the Fed decided that they would actually encourage the banks who are part of the SBA loan program to lend under the SBA loan program, under the stimulus package, by offering to buy the loans that the banks make with money that isn't theirs because it comes through the loan program, and buy them and basically pay the banks for the loans they've just made to people during this process, for which the banks are also getting a 5% fee. So there's all these little cutouts that happen that are part of the sort of the main main orchestration of that package. And then the bigger numbers, part of the stimulus package was about $500 billion worth of money from the Treasury Department to corporations through the Fed. What the Fed does is take that money, multiplies it by sort of Fed magic, and then that money can be used to the tune of $4.5 trillion to $5 trillion to lend out to big corporations. So what looked like a $2.2 trillion package is actually somewhere like a $6.5 trillion package, with most of it going through the Fed to companies and to banks that are involved with those companies and with the Small Business Association loans.
Small business part I get, and there's actually some logic to it. The reason they're using the banks is because they want to make the process quicker. If you go apply to the government doesn't have infrastructure for loans, it's more difficult. It'll take a longer period of time. So they incentivize the banks with a certain interest rates and certain percentages, et cetera. I get it. And that actually does get to the small businesses. So far, not that bad. Now, when we turn to the big businesses, then it becomes this black box, and all the rest of us lose track of it. So there's a much bigger piece of the pie going to big businesses. So is it the same concept? The banks get 5% and then loan the money to multinational corporations, or is it different?
One is, yes, through the stimulus package, that $500 billion gets multiplied at the Fed into lots of more money. And that money then goes through banks to those big corporations. So they're still going through whoever their banks are, but it's money that's been multiplied under that corporate process and going through banks, sort of like small people. But for small people and small businesses, that money isn't multiplied to that kind of effect. So it has a larger multiplication factor for the big businesses. And the other thing the Fed's also doing is loans that are already outstanding from those same big businesses, bonds that are already outstanding, debt they've already taken out that they have to repay, but they can't repay right now because they don't have as much money coming in. The Fed is buying the debt from those corporations as well and just kind of holding it. And we're financing part of that whole. So part of the stimulus package is saying, for example, and this is just one of many, the Fed has many programs. We don't have time to talk about all of them, but just let's talk about one that buys the debt of these big corporations. It's just one of them. So basically the Treasury Department gives the Fed $10 billion, and the Fed turns that into sort of 10 times that. And then it basically allows banks to lend that money to corporations, or it buys those that same corporation's debt. So now it's holding the debt. The corporations don't have to worry about it because they've received money for that debt. And then they go and borrow more under another program in order to keep themselves afloat. So it's like they have multiple ways of tapping into the well.
What does it mean that the Fed multiplies the money?
They receive a piece of money, in one case from the Treasury Department, and because they're the Fed, they're able to say, all right, well, that money it's like collateral for, like, it's almost like a loan to themselves in a way, where they basically borrow money that they create, they electronically create, and they use that money to buy bonds, to buy debt of corporations or banks or so forth. And then they keep those bonds back on their books. So it's like the seed money acts as collateral for them to grow or to leverage that money into a larger amount. And then they use that larger amount to go back and do the same thing multiple times. Where do they get that money from? They literally just create it out of like electronic movements. And then they have a balance sheet of their own. And that balance sheet right now create money. And somewhere beneath all that money, there's a little bit of real money. That real money is coming from the Treasury Department, i.e. the taxpayer. What they're creating off of it, again, is sort of electronic.
Damn it, they failed us. And if you're not angry about that, Michael, and any of you out there, then you're damn wrong. Because you should be angry. Young Turks.
But it was genuine. He was mad.
Cenk Uygur, known online as one of the Young Turks, isn't afraid to throw some punches.
3, 2, 1, fade up.
Cenk the Turk Uygur.
What kind of TV station is this? The whole point is for me to yell and scream and tell you what I think.
It was right out of like Wayne's World.
This guy on this little rinky-dink website is speaking truth to power.
We've been averaging 600,000 views a day, beating most of the cable shows in America.
We're the largest online news show in the world.
We're celebrating our 1 billionth view. Television, we're coming.
More politics ahead with Cenk Uygur.
He knew that the MSNBC opportunity was an experiment.
If fill-in host beats CNN and headline news combined, at some point, they want to give me a show.
Every single year, that comes out of our paycheck. We put it in, and you're saying we were suckers.
When you, as a host, tells someone you're interviewing to shut up, that's going to raise a red flag.
That guy needed a tall glass of shut-up juice.
If President Obama's doing the wrong thing, I'm not going to tell you that he's doing the right thing so I can, quote, support him.
He says to me, "You won't believe the meeting that I just had."
The head of MSNBC talked to me.
They want him off the air.
Cenk took an incredible risk.
We're supposed to challenge the government. That's the role of the media. The Democrats and the Republicans are here to screw you. And who on the air is saying it?
I wouldn't have done what he did.
That if I'm going to be a talk show host, I should be the biggest talk show host in the country. I don't think anyone else does it better. I don't think anyone's even close. Before you know it, I'll be back on your TV doing a national show. I guarantee it.
Cenk Uygur and a Kasparian with you guys, ready for a rock and roll show.
We've never played instruments before, but we're going to try for the first time right now.
My God, if Jesus came back, how much would the Republicans hate him? Jesus would come back and be like, no, I'm done with all the banks. And he said, now you have to give away all of your possessions to the poor. Steve King would be like, oh, Weezy, they're coming to get me. It's not about fighting amongst each other. It's about making sure we correct the political system So our government works for us, and our representatives actually represent us. And unfortunately, not a lot of the rest of the media even understands that concept, but we do here.
You can't be pro-life and pro the death penalty.
They're afraid to do it because they're stuck in this, this lie. The Republicans are great with money and the economy, and then they don't spend all your money and take it from you. It's exactly what they do. Just say it.
Okay, we're about to have some fun on the show. Strap on. That's not a thing. She's gonna fall one of these days. One of these days she's gonna fall.
Okay. All right, we gotta do the story. This country is not run by the people for the people. It's run by corporations. It's run by weapons manufacturers. It's run by private military contractors.
We've been telling you that people care about policy, and people on TV, they're like, no, everybody just cares about gloss and shine and whether you're rolling up your sleeves well. But what's more impressive is policy, and that you should make equal note of that, and you most certainly have not.
Because I heard that they, during 2008, oh, don't worry, the banks paid everything back and the American government actually made money from it. But are they referring to the Treasurer? Or are they talking to the Fed? Talking about the Fed? Did the Fed sell back any of that stuff?
So when we hear about how the banks paid back with interest the money they were, given by the federal government, yes, there was a pot of $700 billion, which was created by the Emergency Stabilization Act, which created TARP, and they used that money to sort of dole out to different banks to make them whole on bad assets they created and bad credit derivatives bets that they made. And at some point, those were repaid. Now, why were they repaid? Because that's the really good question. They were repaid because the banks that basically got the money from the Treasury Department, from the government, from us, got money from the Fed in order to repay that money. So it's not like rocket science that if somebody gives you money to repay something else to someone else, that you look really good in the process. It's not your money. The money came from the Fed. The banks don't repay the Fed. That's why, towards the end of your question, that's why the Fed has multiple trillions of dollars of assets still left on its books. And that's why under this crisis 2.0, the Fed is increasing the size of its books and the money it's creating to give to banks for their assets.
So we got a toxic asset that the bank created. And back in the day, it was because they bet on housing, and those are bad bets. There were bad mortgages in there, and they bundled them together, and that asset was going to blow up. Now, we have some of that today, too, in a different context, but that's easier to understand because a lot of people have heard about that, right? So the bank has that. Normally, it would blow up in their account. And when they went to go sell it, if it was worth, let's keep it easy, if it was worth $100, it's now worth maybe $40. Uh-oh, they lost $60 and they're in a lot of trouble, right?
Right.
But instead, they sold it to the Fed.
Right.
Now, when they sell it to the Fed, who determines how much they pay for it? Do they pay the $100 that the bank was claiming, or do they pay the $40 that it's actually worth?
They pay the $100. So
of course,
and they did during the subprime crisis, and that's what they're doing now. And during the subprime crisis, the idea that why they did that was because, well, we didn't have time. Things were in crisis. Things needed to move. Liquidity needed to get back into the system. Markets were going to die. People weren't going to be able to get money out of ATMs. It's not dissimilar now, except they're not even bothering to sort of go through that rhetoric. Now it's just like, this is what's going to happen. And so banks, especially now that the Fed can buy not just, then it was toxic mortgages, now it's toxic corporate loans and other things. Literally any other kind of financial asset, just period, the banks have almost, they can now buy in the same manner.
And my guess is people don't sell them valuable things that they're going to make a profit off of. They sell them or unload on them the worst garbage they have.
That's right.
Because they want to get rid of it. What's stopping them from buying $60 trillion worth of chips?
Literally nothing. I mean, nothing was stopping them last financial crisis, except for at some point, sort of there was other games in town, right? So at some point, banks, companies, the stock market, it was all sort of working enough that the Fed didn't have to buy as much at those prices because they could get those prices in the market. One of the reasons they could get some of the prices in the market that were higher is because the Fed already kind of created this sort of artificial value of what their stuff was worth to begin with. But at some point, that artificial value became, for banks and companies, the market value.
The main problem, right, is if they print too much money, or these days electronic movements, then presumably inflation is going to go up. Is that the main issue?
Inflation goes up anyway because they're buying all these, at some point, inflation of stock, inflation of the value of debt that shouldn't have that value. The whole idea of what prices should be get totally out of whack for any financial security. Like everything just is valued at much higher than it should be. And so there's an element of inflation there, but it's for those particular assets. Inflation has happened. Like before even this crisis, this component of what I think has been a crisis since the financial crisis of 2008 happened. There was already inflation in everything that everyday people need to use in their real lives. There was inflation in rents. There's inflation in education. There's inflation, obviously, in health, foundationally sound economy. So there is a worry of inflation, but inflation in terms of real economic growth doesn't happen because of these movements. It doesn't happen because these movements are fictitious. If you're creating money out of thin air and buying stuff with it, it doesn't really value the foundation of the economy. It just sort of values the financial assets that it goes after.
Anderson Cooper has asked Bernie Sanders approximately 3,000 times, how are you going to pay for that? So let's take student debt, because that's an easy one, because it's also debt. If they wanted to, instead of buying toxic assets from the banks and just putting it on their balance sheet, could the Federal Reserve take the $1.4 trillion in student debt and just buy it?
They absolutely could, because they would basically, through the same process, they would basically create some money, say seeded by the Treasury Department, if the Treasury Department wanted to get involved, inflate that amount of money, sort of electronically create more, and buy up those loans. And then the payments from those loans would basically go to the Fed at some point in the future, but the students would be made whole.
Who the hell is the Fed? Because they're not individuals in running their own business, or they're human beings, but they're not doing it for themselves, right? They're not businesses. They're not the government. Who are they?
They're a bunch of people that are approved by the government, selected by the president to effectively. Their MO is supposedly maintain stability in the markets, and then create a good employment situation, keep inflation low, and all these things that are in their mandate. But the reality is, the Fed was created by the banks back in the early 1900s. The Federal Reserve Act was passed in 1913, but even up until that year, by banks who were concerned that when there was a recession, or if there was a problem, or if there was a run on banks, or a liquidity issue for banks, that they had nowhere to go besides the Treasury Department. If the Treasury Department could, big bank that's there, and that's why and how it was created, to lend money to banks when they're having problems. Now, banks are members of the Federal Reserve, so it's like they're lending money to their own members when their own members have problems. And those members, at the time it was created, were supposed to put in money sort of on reserve. That's why it's called the Federal Reserve. They're supposed to reserve money into this entity that is selected by the government, but is supposed to operate independently, and reserve that money there. But over time, what's happened, and certainly most recently, is the Fed just creates money rather than uses that reserve to help the banks when they have problems.
So, of course, when they go to buy a couple of $1 trillion worth of assets, they're not going to buy your moped. They're going to buy the toxic assets of the banks, because the people making the decision are the heads of the banks. Okay, so Nomi, it's super important now to talk about, how is this going to go wrong?
We saw what just went wrong, right? And which is that they printed about $4.5 trillion into the coronavirus crisis, and now they're printing more. What we saw was that no matter how much they printed the last crisis around, when a problem arose, and it was a problem that some people thought was coming, some people didn't know, but when something that acute happened externally to the financial system that impacted the financial system, people on the bottom of that system, individual small businesses, people that aren't even sort of counted in that, are the ones that most get hurt. The markets, yes, they went down, but the way it's working is the solution of the Fed creating all this money is the sole reason why the markets kind of turned around after reaching a very low point in the middle of March, because they're seeing that money is coming their way. And so if money is coming their way, it's going to elevate the stock market. People are going to start to talk about that again. And that's a dislocation from the real economy. And so we're going to get further and further away. And then we're going to have another crisis. And at that point, once we get through this one, the Fed creates all sorts of multiple trillions of dollars to continue to do this now. That it will just continue to happen again. This is the problem. The problem is it doesn't end because there is no limit, and the money isn't used in a proportional way that benefits the real economy from sort of the foundation up.
No, I mean, there's got to be a reckoning. You can't have a house of cards like this and not have a reckoning.
Well, right now, you're going to have some corporate bankruptcies. But the problem that's occurring, I believe, that will occur first, is that it's going to be some of the smaller ones that don't have access to enough money to keep going, or to sort of retool their employees when they have the chance, all of them that they had to let go, and at the bigger companies who have these relationships with the Fed and their own banks who have the relationships with the Fed plus the relationships they have with Washington, and so forth, receive the benefit, and they don't do the bankruptcies. And it's not like we want all companies to go bankrupt, but the point is they get a disproportionate piece of the pie, and people don't. And what that means is the next reckoning, if you want to call that, is a fall from a higher height. I mean, this is what I was talking about in the end of my last book, in the end of Collusion. It was literally like, we have a situation. It's the last page of this book, and I'm not saying this to pull my book. It's just this is what was so obvious. Companies had all of this cheap money that was manufactured, to banks, from the Fed, through banks from the Fed, and they used it to buy their stock. Banks use it to buy their stock. They used it to, pay dividends to people to inflate their stock. They used the stock to inflate their, their compensation. They didn't put enough away in reserve for an emergency, whatever the size of that emergency is, just even anything. And anything that could have been enough that they could have used and pointed to and been like, look, we've got some of this. That did not happen. And so as a result, and I said this in the book as well, you were going to get a point, there was going to be some external thing that was going to happen, and all of that borrowing, all of that cheap money and zero and low interest rates that allow companies to borrow and buy stock and borrow and buy stock and borrow and buy stock for literally no cost to them, because interest rates were so low to them, was going to cave. And that's what we saw with the 35% market drop, that all caved. The sort of value of their credit, of their debt caved. Then the Fed comes in and says, no, we're going to scoop up the bottom. And so now we're sort of back in the same, sort of negative cycle.
This thing's going to blow. I don't know when.
It's going to happen. It's going to, it's already happening again. It's already happening again, and we're not out of this phase.
Last time I gave the analogy of the housing market was the trigger. The derivative bets that they made on top of those mortgages were the gun, right? Yeah. So in this case, even bigger picture, I think that the next crisis, either this one or the next one, could be the trigger. But the gun is the Federal Reserve buying endless amounts of assets.
Yeah, and everything.
That's going to create a catastrophe and a Great Depression like nothing we've ever seen before. That's worse than any of these individual crises.
Yeah, no, it's like that third time problem, the sort of negative charm. We failed to figure out what to do last time. We made it worse into this particular crisis with respect to the Fed, with respect to the risk that's taken on in the system, and then other people actually, fall under that, the weight of the problems that then happen. And now we're recreating it to be just a bigger problem. And I do think, first of all, it's going to take a while to get out of this phase. But I do think the next one is going to be even bigger, because that's what's been happening. Each time we don't learn from the last time. And each time we're basically, facing a fall from a just higher height of debt, of derivatives, of sort of, the creation of money against no value, to supposedly solve things that doing that doesn't solve.
Yeah. All right. Nomi Prince, one of the top experts in the country on this. Definitely check out our book, Collusion, where you'll see that reference that Nomi was talking about, and get a full picture of how these crises happen and who takes advantage of them. Nomi, thank you so much for joining us on the Young Turks. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
As our citizens persevere through this challenge, we're renewing American unity, and we're replenishing American will, and we are witnessing new American valor each and every day. We see it every day. And this crisis reminds us that no matter how hard it gets, no matter what obstacles we must overcome, especially after going through this nightmare, this evil beast like me.
Welcome to the swamp.
I am your voice. I am racist, terrorist, Antifa, clean cold.
What are the Young Turks? Jake Huger, Atticus Barron with you guys. Lovely Monday evening across America. Or so we think, looking outside our windows as we stay home. Mm-hmm. All right. The whole world is quarantined, which is a trippy thing. Like, we just got used to it fairly quickly. And every once in a while, I think, oh my God, the entire world is quarantined. Like that just happened. Right?
Yeah, it is pretty crazy to, especially like on a Saturday night. You know, I'm sure most people can relate to needing to just go outside or go for a drive just to like get out of the house. But it is crazy on a Saturday night to drive around, especially in a city as densely populated as LA, and not see anyone outside at all.
Yeah, although there's the irony that when you go for a jog, there are more people outside because they're going stir crazy. So they go outside and walk around. Like the dogs are exhausted from getting walked. They're like, I got it. Really? We're walking again? Right?
Funny story. I've had a bike for, I don't know, maybe 5 years now. And I have ridden that bike a handful of times until this whole social distancing thing happened. And I have used my bike at least like twice a week. Like I'm bike riding, I'm going running, like I'm doing everything I can just to like get out. But you're right. There's so many people out who are like trying to get some physical activity. So you gotta cover that face.
Yeah. Yeah. Look, with me, it's a little tougher because it's such a shame, to cover this face, but you got to do what you got to do. Mm-hmm. And so, look, I will save more of the personal stories for the post game, tyt.com/joy. Like what happens to me on my jogs? Because people recognize me a decent amount when I jog. So new funny stories about that. And this is not all a preview for the shirt I'm wearing, although it happens to coincidentally be a nice lead into it. So our new shirts are out, quarantine. So I got to stand up here. Oh, there you go. You see, with a TYT in the middle. Mm-hmm. Now, is that the correct spelling? Not remotely. We just threw a TYT in the middle, like see what happens, right? And you've seen it in the graphics, but immediately people start like this shirt. Any shirt that's got quarantine on it, people like. Anyway, shoptyt.com. I'm not saying anything. I'm just saying shoptyt.com. All right, we got a massive show ahead for you guys. Stories on Trump, Biden, you know it. Casper, go.
Over the weekend, the New York Times published a damning piece regarding all the different individuals who had warned Donald Trump about the severity of the coronavirus as early as January. Now, we had already known that there were some warnings coming from various advisors within his administration, but the details that were reported by the Times indicate that there were far more warnings than even we knew about that Trump was exposed to, and he just did not take any of these warnings seriously, mostly because he believed that these individuals were part of the so-called deep state and weren't actually interested in giving him accurate information because he thinks that he's constantly being sabotaged by the very people who surround him, people who are supposed to be helping him. So the Times reported throughout January, as Trump repeatedly played down the seriousness of the virus, an array of figures inside his government, from top White House advisors to experts deep in the cabinet departments and intelligence agencies, identified the threat, sounded alarms, and made clear the need for aggressive action. And unfortunately, we didn't get that aggressive action until mid-March. Now, to give you some of the specific examples provided by the Times, the National Security Council, for instance, responsible for tracking pandemics, received intelligence reports in early January predicting the spread of the virus to the United States, and within weeks was raising options like keeping Americans home from work and shutting down cities the size of Chicago. Trump would again avoid such steps until March. Despite Trump's denial weeks later, he was told at the time about a January 29th memo produced by his trade advisor, Peter Navarro, which of course we detailed recently, laying out in striking detail the potential risks of a coronavirus pandemic, as many as 500,000 deaths and trillions of dollars in economic losses. And even after that, Trump did nothing. Again, he waited until mid-March. And then finally, here's some more new information. HHS Secretary Alex Azar directly warned Trump of the possibility of a pandemic during a call on January 30th. This was the second warning he delivered to the president about the virus in 2 weeks. Trump, who was on Air Force One while traveling for appearances in the Midwest, responded that Azar was being alarmist. So there's more, but I mean, it's example after example after example of Donald Trump being warned about what's really going on, and he doesn't take it seriously. partly because he thinks that there's this deep state that's conspiring against him, but also because he really wanted this pandemic to take a back seat to the trade negotiations that he was engaged in with China.
Yeah. So there's two factors here. One is how much was he warned, and second is why didn't he act? So now what we knew in bits and pieces has been confirmed through this story and put out in great detail. So there are two dates that jumped out at me here. One was end of January, when it wasn't just Navarro's big memo. Several different government officials at the same time warned Trump and the White House, this thing's really bad. Okay, we got to start acting now. Otherwise, as Navarro's memo pointed out, millions of lives are at stake and trillions of dollars to get Trump's attention, which is true. And as we found out, did happen, right? At least the trillions of dollars. And we now have over 1 million cases worldwide, obviously. And in America, we're quickly approaching 1 million on our own. We're well above 500,000 cases as we speak. We now lead the world, triple the second closest country, and lead the world in deaths as well, partly because our leader did nothing. Anyway, at the end of January, he gets all these different warnings. It turns out he was really mad at Navarro, who he really likes otherwise, not because Navarro warned him, but because he wrote it down. He's like, you schmuck, when you're doing criminal conspiracies, you don't write anything down, because later the prosecutors will have evidence. Why did you write it down? Because he didn't want to act on it. So he knows at the time. So when he said earlier, Navarro's, I never saw that. I never saw that, right? No, now we know he did see it, and he was mad at Navarro for writing it down so there'd be evidence, okay? That's how he views things. Now, people in government write things down so that others can read it and act on it. I know our president doesn't read. By the way, our president doesn't read past the page. On that alone, he should be removed from office. Anyone who supports him should be embarrassed for the rest of their lives, and we're an international laughingstock. Anyway, so the second big date is mid-February. That's when our health officials find out without a shadow of a doubt that the virus is transmitted from people who are asymptomatic. They don't have symptoms, and they were walking around seemingly perfectly healthy and spreading the virus. They sound the alarm bells in a bigger way. But when they do, they were going to go take it to Trump. And like, they know you got to tell him in person. You got to be really careful because he's an idiot and he could just, go off at any time and do something crazy and insane. So they're like, all right, they came up with a strategy of how to talk to the man-child. But then one official, while Trump was coming back from a trip from India, a health official put out a statement saying, this is a real issue. The country has to act on right now because people without symptoms can transmit the virus, etc. That set everything into a panic, including the stock market. Stock market crashes, and then Trump goes, nope, that's it. Now I'm not doing anything. Okay, I hope you guys are happy. So I'm just going to sit around because now you made my beloved stock market crash. Okay, so I'm not going to listen to you health officials anymore. How am I supposed to get reelected without the stock market? Okay, so.
Right. Yeah, so you're absolutely right, Cenk. He was aboard Air Force One, returning back to the United States from his trip to India when all of this happened. And you're right, he was way more concerned about the negative impact on the stock market than the pandemic. And again, this was in mid-February. He did not act until mid-March. So he waited another month to actually do anything of substance and take this seriously. And in the meantime, by the way, ever since, he's been saying nobody could have known that this would have been so serious. This totally caught us off guard, but it did not catch him off guard. He has been warned about this since January, and all this time between late January to mid-March, this is the kind of commentary you heard from someone like Donald Trump publicly, with dates included.
We think we have it very well under control. We pretty much shut it down coming in from China. Now, the virus that we're talking about having to do, a lot of people think that goes away in April with the heat. So we're in very good shape, very well under control in our country. Because of all we've done, the risk to the American people remains very low. but we have it so well under control. And we only have 15 people, and they're getting better.
Now the Democrats are politicizing the coronavirus. And this is their new hoax.
You take a solid flu vaccine, you don't think that would have an impact or much of an impact on corona?
No.
If, we have thousands or hundreds of thousands of people that get better just by, sitting around and even going to work. Some of them go to work.
Have to be calm. It'll go away. We're doing very well, and we've done a fantastic job with respect to that subject on the virus.
I have a feeling that a lot of the numbers that are being said in some areas are just bigger than they're going to be.
Okay, so we put the dates in there so you can see. All of those comments were after the end of January, when he got significant warnings from several different people inside his administration, and he was annoyed that they had warned him in writing, so he knew. And half of those or more, as you can go back and watch the clip, were after mid-February, when they knew definitively that it's wildly contagious and the government must act immediately. But that another month goes by as you see Trump going, no big deal, it'll disappear by April when the weather gets warm. We have it under control. You can just go to work. What's the big deal? It's all good. So why? Why did he do it? Anna mentioned a couple of reasons. He mistrusts some of the officials. Are they Hillary Clinton leftovers? Obama leftovers? Who cares? They're in this case, they're doctors and scientists. They're not. All the doctors are not on some sort of weirdo crusade to get you. They're in an understandable crusade against the virus, not against you. But everything's about me, right? So that's part of it. Second part is he's doing the China trade deal, and he needs that deal so he can say, oh, you see that? I beat China and my tariffs worked, and I got a great deal with them. We weren't winning, now we're winning. And he needs that for his election. But to me, the most important part was the stock market, and you could see it. For him, that's the end-all, be-all for his election. How's the economy doing? And what Trump tried, which is what he always does, and to be fair to him, has worked in the past because of the grotesque incompetence of the Democratic Party and the mealy-mouthed neutrality of the mainstream media overall, which is, I'm just going to market my way out of this. I'm just going to pretend it doesn't exist, and I'm going to call it fake news. And if I just, say that everything's great, we have it under control enough times, we don't actually have to take any action, which might hurt my beloved stock market and my beloved re-election efforts. So I'm going to purposely ignore all the scientists and all the doctors so that I could market my way out of this through bluster. And it didn't work, because that's not how viruses work.
So I thought that one of the most interesting revelations from this lengthy article was the one person who actually did persuade him to take this all seriously, and it was Dr. Deborah Birx. So the Times writes, in the end, aides said, it was Dr. Deborah Birx who helped to persuade Trump. Soft-spoken and fond of the kind of charts and graphs Trump prefers, Dr. Birx did not have the rough edges that could irritate the president. He often told people he thought she was elegant. This man makes all of his decisions based on appearances, 100%. He likes that she's soft-spoken. She's not rough around the edges, whatever that means. Because if you hit Trump with data that isn't in the form of some sort of visual, like a graph or a chart, and if you come at him, in maybe a monotone voice, maybe you're not warm enough to him, he's just not going to take you seriously, and he's going to write you off as part of the deep state. That's it. That's the kind of thinking we're dealing with here when it comes to leadership in the executive branch.
She was elegant.
She is pretty elegant.
I mean,
but that has nothing to do with her qualifications, Yeah.
No. It's disqualifying. He should be removed from office. You're going to listen to a doctor or a scientist based on whether they're elegant enough? Who would be that preposterously stupid? And apparently the leader of the United States of America. So look, if you didn't know things like that about Trump, and he's now done this 1,000 times, he looked like he was out of central casting. I liked his look. That's why I picked him for Secretary of Defense. What? You picked someone based on their looks for Secretary of Defense? Okay. Anyway, if you didn't know that about him and you don't follow politics that much, I get it. I mean, look, the literal word is you're ignorant. That's okay. But like, hey, I'm ignorant of physics. I get it, right? But it's not a great thing. Try to look into it. But if you're watching this video and you know this and you still like Donald Trump, like, oh yeah, well, whether you should listen to a scientist or not, in a worldwide pandemic that might kill millions of people, is, of course, the first characteristic is she elegant or not? Okay, well then you're a stupid person. You're an incredibly stupid person, just like Donald Trump. So congratulations, peas in a pod. And that's why we're not the leaders of the free world anymore. Because people look at us and go, oh my God, look at who they picked. Oh my God, that's their leader. Why do you think we're number one in number of coronavirus cases? Why do you think we're number one in deaths? Why do you think we're number one in all of those disastrous categories? Because we have a moron in charge who's also a narcissist and couldn't care less about your life. Look, last thing, Alex Azar, who was right about all this, mortal mistake politically. If you're right and Donald Trump is wrong and then people find out about it, you're a goner. Look, there's no good guys in this administration. Alex Azar was picked by Donald Trump. It's not, you won't agree with Alex Azar on anything else. We've criticized him 1,000 times on other things, but apparently he was right about this. And Trump will not stand for anyone being right. If there's someone who's correct and is going to embarrass Donald Trump, oh, he's going to get fired. Being right is the worst thing you could do in the Trump administration. So tick, 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 tick. Just a matter of time before Azar is fired. And God knows who else. We'll talk later in the show about Dr. Fauci. He's also right. He might also be fired. This is the petty little man-child that's in charge. And everyone in the government knows it. They all strategize about how to talk to the man-child so you don't upset him near nap time.
So when we come back from the break, we'll actually dive right into that Fauci story. It's pretty terrifying considering he's one of the only adults in the room, but Trump seems to be displeased with him. So we'll have that story and more when we return.
Can you name the representative of your district?
The representative of my district? Oof.
I have no idea.
I actually don't know who the representative of my district is.
Do you know what the corporate tax rate is?
I think it's pretty high. I should know this.
Like in between 20-25%. I don't know.
How many amendments are in the U.S. Constitution?
Oh no.
This brings me back to grade school.
I should know this because I was a history major, but I do not remember.
I don't know that.
I don't know.
I don't know.
I have no clue.
Nope. I don't know the answer to that one.
You don't know? I didn't know. It's time to change that. We live in the best country in the world. We live in the most powerful country in the world. We love our American freedom, but only half of us take part in the political process. Only half of us vote. We don't fulfill our duties as U.S. citizens to make this country a better place. It's time that we use our voices as a team, as a country, to become better. We will stand up. We will be empowered. We will stay educated and informed about politics every single day because it's our responsibility. And Politiscope just made it easy for you. So join me, join us, and let's be Americans.
The TYT affiliate program's finally here. Now you think, finally, I didn't know about it, but I did. I've been waiting to do this for a long, long time. Why? Because it's the best win-win we got. When we make money, you make money. When you make money, we make money. Hey, that's how we're supposed to do it as progressives. We're supposed to do it together. So this way, we're not the Young Turks, you're the Young Turks. How many times have I told you that? And now in this case, that actually even applies to us selling membership together. Now look, another part of the win is that
you get to spread the message about the progressive point of view. And that's awesome. So we're doing good in the world, but on top of that, you get commission on it. So all you got to do is set up your free account. Once you complete that easy process, you receive your free personalized link, and then you start sharing that with everybody, and then voila, you're in the ball game. Look, guys, I'd ask you to do this anyway because it's important to spread the message, and it's important to keep the lights on to support independent media and the home of progressives. But in this case, I think it's even better because then we get to grow together, and every little bit helps, not just for us, but for you guys. So if this could be a nice way to get a little bit extra cash while doing something wonderful in the world, well, I love that. So that's why we thought of this, and we hope that you participate, and I'm really, really psyched about it. Let's do this together.
The Supreme Court has ruled that Donald Trump can use military funds to build his border wall. Source that I saw in their mouths. I believe that. To acquit Donald Trump.
2020 is endgame. Everything. If progressives win, we're done apologizing. They should apologize to us for all that they have done to us 1,000 times over.
All right, back on Young Turks. Cenk Uygur, Anna Kasparian with you guys. All right, you guys ready for some good news? Let's do some good news. All right. Wonderful matching grant for TYT.com/go, our fundraising effort. Wait. Hold for it. How much? $50,000 from Joe from LA.
What?
Yes.
That's insane.
I like that Anna didn't know. It took her by surprise.
No, but I know there was an email about it, but homegirl's busy. You know what I'm saying?
So here's the deal, guys. Here's the deal. So speaking of Anna not knowing, you guys might be able to figure out before she does who Joe from LA is, but savvy TYT viewers might be able to piece it together. Anyway, it's a matching grant. And it's to get us to our goal in April. We're trying to get to 200,000 in April. So he's going to match every dollar that you guys put in. Okay. So you put in $1, all of a sudden it's $100. No, I'm kidding. That would be great. You put in $1, all of a sudden it's doubled and it's $2. You put in 10, it's $20. You put in 50, it's $100 because of the matching grant. And hence basically the slogan for this particular campaign is too strong, as in the number 2. Nobody saw that coming. That's a clever twist. And then there's 2 of us, Anna and me, in the picture. Oh my God, this is going to work. Okay, TYT.com/go. Love it. Thank you, Joe from LA. That's extraordinary. Really, really appreciate it. And let's check to see where the thermometer is right now. As we start this matching grant on this level. Look at this, 95,853. I didn't know it was that high. I don't know how we got there. Okay, great, awesome. So perfect. With the matching grant, we'll all be almost at 200,000, and hopefully we'll finish that off by the end of the month. Let's go. Let's do it right now. So thank you guys, and thank you, Joe. Okay, so now let me give you guys a couple of quick comments. Lots of comments about the shirts. I like that. In fact, Lisa Vibes, I can't read your whole thing, but she wants me to put on a collared shirt. And Saturday she tuned in at 6 o'clock Eastern because she lost track of days. It's happening to all of us, Lisa. You're not alone. Okay. And then I think this is Lane. Lane writes in, I'm looking for a Covfefe 19 shirt. Clever. Okay, we're going to think about that next. I got a whole bunch of new shirts, but today's shirt, if you didn't see it in the beginning, is Quarantined with TYT in the middle. Shop TYT.com. Love it. And then Here we go as quickly as I can. Oh, Theater Goddess, I wanted to get this in. It takes a woman to figure out that you need to talk to Trump like you would a child about having a meltdown.
Yeah, I was going to make a comment like that too. Definitely. And like, she does have a calming way of giving you bad news, right?
Yeah.
Like, she's said some things that I don't necessarily agree with. But again, I mean, she's still a medical professional, and she has to toe this line between giving people accurate information that they need to, survive this pandemic, and avoiding hurting Donald Trump's feelings with the truth.
That's right. She looks like she's out of central casting. I like her. Anyway, Michael Hilburn and Nicholas Caesar, thank you for using YouTube Super Chat. We really appreciate it. Let's give you more stories. Anna, what's next?
All right, let's do it.
If we had, right from the very beginning, shut everything down, it may have been a little bit different, but there was a lot of pushback about shutting things down back then.
That one statement by Anthony Fauci during his interview with Jake Tapper has led to some concerns that Donald Trump is genuinely thinking about firing him, because what he said apparently hurt his feelings so much. Now, what he said there was the truth. And it was based on pretty detailed reporting regarding how Donald Trump was warned about the pandemic as early as January, and he didn't take action. Had he taken action, clearly we would have been better prepared for the pandemic, and we would have saved more lives. And so when Trump saw that exchange, he didn't like it, and apparently others didn't like it either. But I want to give you more context. So let's take a look at more of the video, and then I'll tell you what Trump recently did, which sort of hints that he's considering getting rid of Fauci. Take a look.
Do you think lives could have been saved if social distancing, physical distancing, stay-at-home measures had started third week of February instead of mid-March?
You know, Jake, again, it's the what would have, what could have. It's very difficult to go back and say that. I mean, obviously, you could logically say that if you had a process that was ongoing and you started mitigation earlier, you could have saved lives. Obviously, no one is going to deny that. But what goes into those kinds of decisions is complicated. But you're right. I mean, obviously, if we had, right from the very beginning, shut everything down, it may have been a little bit different. But there was a lot of pushback about shutting things down back then.
And if you look at the fuller context of that discussion, it's so clear that Fauci is doing his best to be careful, to not place any blame on the Trump administration, because there are two things that'll get you fired by Donald Trump. Number one, if you agree with him too well and people think that you're better than Trump or more popular than Trump and you take the shine away from Trump, you're going to get fired. And then, of course, number two, if you disagree with Trump in any way, even slightly publicly, he'll try to get rid of you. So he retweeted, Trump did, someone else's tweet where they used the hashtag #FireFauci. Okay, the person who did the original tweet is Deanna Lorraine. She was a former congressional candidate. She ran against Nancy Pelosi. She's a Republican, clearly. And she wrote, Fauci is now saying that had Trump listened to the medical experts earlier, he could have saved more lives. Fauci was telling people on February 29th that there was nothing to worry about, and it posed no threat to the U.S. public at large. Time to fire Fauci. Now, he did not say that. Of course, that's made up. But of course, Donald Trump did retweet that with a quote saying, sorry, fake news. It's all on tape. I banned China long before people spoke up. Thank you to own. So, Cenk, jump in. Are you concerned that Fauci's a goner?
Oh, of course I'm concerned. So, and now the White House is putting out statements saying, oh, look, it's fake news that we're firing Fauci. I don't know where anybody got that idea. It's all the reporter's fault for trying to stir up controversy here. I don't know where we got that idea. I don't know, maybe when the president tweeted, fire Fauci? I mean, and look, to be extra fair, I looked at that tweet that Anna just read you. I found it as soon as the story broke. And I thought, well, let me see. Maybe fire Fauci was like a little hashtag at the bottom, which it is. You see the hashtag at the bottom. And then the rest of the message was about something else, and Trump missed it because he tweets like 70 tweets an hour, and he just, oh yeah, retweet, and he missed it, right? No, the whole tweet was all about it's Fauci's fault, and we should fire Fauci. So if I retweeted something that said #fire Kasparian,
people would not like that. People would be very upset. They would reconsider supporting TYT very strongly.
Okay. So first of all, obviously I'd be decapitated. But second of all, that's not a thing that you do like and go, oh, whatever. No, that's really, really serious. And everybody would take it seriously. They'd be like, wow, why did Cenk say that? Is he thinking about doing that? That's crazy. Of course he's thinking about it. That's why he retweeted it. See, I feel like we constantly have conversations with somebody who just escaped from a mental asylum. You're like, we're having a conversation about it because you said it. No, I didn't. You're fake. Okay, I mean,
No, it's crazy.
I know.
We're all being gaslit 24/7. By the way, by both sides, but certainly by the Trump administration.
100%. So, and Dr. Fauci did say one thing wrong in that Jake Tapper interview. He said, look, could we have done more and saved more lives? I don't think anybody would dispute that. Are you nuts? Of course. There's one guy who would dispute it. His name is Donald J. Trump. He disputes it every single day. No, I take no responsibility at all. We've handled this amazing. That's why our country doesn't have that many cases. That's what he used to say all the time. Now we lead the world in number of cases and number of deaths. And he's still saying, I wouldn't have done anything differently. No, he's a total moron. Of course he disputes that he did anything wrong because the narcissist in chief would never, ever admit to doing something wrong. Look, no, madman is in charge. And soon, if Fauci continues to be correct like this, of course his job is in danger.
Yeah, I'm terrified because Fauci is, I think Dr. Deborah Birx has done a fine job, but I think that Fauci is less willing to,
lie.
So Dr. Birx, there were a few times where I feel like she tried to help Trump cover things up. I don't have the specific examples in front of me. We've talked about them on the show previously, but Dr. Anthony Fauci never does that. I haven't seen a single instance of him doing that. He's very fact-based. He gets to the point. He gets put in awkward situations where people are trying to possibly instigate and they're asking about Trump's failures. And Fauci, again, has to toe that line. But he's never, as far as I've seen, he hasn't misrepresented anything. The one area of disagreement where Fauci was wrong and Trump was right was early on when Trump actually wanted to implement the travel ban on China specifically. Now, health experts, not just Fauci, believe that that would not actually help in stopping the spread of the virus because, for instance, when people hear that there might be some sort of travel ban, they might flee the country or, try to travel before that ban is implemented, and it causes more problems. But in the end, it would have actually been smart to do that, and Fauci came around. But after that, I mean, everything that he said is factual, and we desperately do need that adult in the room who clearly states that it is too soon to lift any guidelines on social distancing. It's something that Trump's been flirting with nonstop. And I'm worried that without the Faucis in the room, Trump is going to give into, his worst instincts and encourage people to go out and work and expose themselves to this virus.
So, look, let's combine two stories from today into one. The New York Times earlier story that explained that eventually Trump did that ban on people coming in from China, that was pushed by the hawks inside the administration, partly as a shot at China, like, ha, we banned you. Now, world's worst reason to do a ban. As it turned out, that was okay. So, I guess with the benefit of hindsight, I probably would have done it too, but medical experts are really split on whether those work. That's the least important part. The most important part is huge amounts of testing. That's how they contained it in South Korea. That's every scientist agrees. Because if you have a lot of testing, then you know who's got it as quickly as possible. You isolate them. You find out who they were in contact with, and try to make sure that they stay at home. That's a much more efficient way to get control of the virus. What Trump did instead was, all right, I banned people from coming from China. It's now taken care of. No, it's not taken care of, you idiot. You can't just say, oh, okay, if they can't come here from China, and obviously it can't come here. It was already here by the time he did that. The first case was on January 21st, and he did the ban at the end of January. It's the least effective way of mitigating. In fact, it's not a mitigation technique. It's an attempt at containment, and it doesn't work. So it's not a bad thing to try, but it's like the first step. You have to do the other steps that are much more important. So the reason I tell you all that is, one, because it's important for you to know and how to combat this, but two, so when you hear Trump talking about, no, I did a travel ban on China, so I did everything I needed to. That's not remotely true. He should have ordered the test. We still don't have enough tests. We have 583,000 confirmed cases of COVID-19 in America, and we barely tested anyone. Imagine how many cases we'd have and how much better we could contain if we actually, and mitigate, if we actually had the tests. They should be everywhere. And by the way, we could reopen America more efficiently if you have more tests, because then we could contain the people who have the virus and let others go outside. But the schmuck keeps thinking if you ignore the problem, it'll go away. That's why we shouldn't have a schmuck as a president.
Well, let's talk a little bit about how the post office has been affected by COVID-19 and how Trump is using this to his advantage. So there's been a lot less mail being delivered by the post office, which means that the post office is bringing in a lot less revenue. Now, this makes sense considering the stay-at-home orders throughout the country. People are staying at home, they're not going to work, they're not sending out as much mail. And so the economic crisis that's been connected to this pandemic has really hit the post office hard. And so the question is, will the federal government assist this government agency in remaining alive? And keep in mind that the post office is treated very differently from all other government agencies. They are expected to provide or pay for health insurance for their employees 75 years in advance, which is, again, a standard that you don't see anywhere else, especially when it comes to government agencies. And it is expected to be profitable, which is not expected of any other government agency. So I'll get into details about that context in just a minute, but let me tell you what the Trump administration did when it came to the stimulus package to help the post office. The American Prospect reports that when the time came to put together a $2.2 trillion rescue package for the American economy, Democrats attempted to add $25 billion to shore up the United States Postal Service, less than the $29 billion in grants the airlines ended up getting. Remember, the airlines got $29 billion in grants. Donald Trump saw that and was like, no, non-starter. He told them, quote, or he actually told the Washington Post, we told them very clearly that the president was not going to sign the bill if money for the Postal Service was in it. So eventually, luckily, negotiators decided to allow the USPS to borrow $10 billion from the Treasury Department, but it needs to be paid back. So it is a loan. A committee aide said Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin told lawmakers during negotiations, quote, you can have a loan or you can have nothing at all. So I was wondering, Cenk, what is it about the post office that makes Donald Trump so angry? Why is he trying to retaliate against the post office? And it turns out that he's obviously a child who's very envious of anyone who has real success or real money. And so Jeff Bezos and Amazon rely heavily on the U.S. Postal Service in order to deliver many of their packages. And so Donald Trump is angry at that because he's jealous of Jeff Bezos. And so apparently he's gone after the Postal Service for providing cheap shipping for Amazon in the past. And he's been harping on that since the beginning of his administration. So now he gets to take advantage of their economic decline or financial decline as a result of the coronavirus.
So, look, I'm not positive that that's the only reason why. There's a toxic stew of insecurity and old grudges stirring around in Donald Trump's expansive head, because there isn't much in there. So there's a lot of room to bounce around. And so it might be like an old stereotype. He has all these stereotypes the Puerto Ricans, they responded to the hurricane badly because they're lazy. African Americans in Central Park 5, well, they must have done something anyway, because that's how African Americans are. I mean, I can go on and on, right? Republican Jewish leaders, they like to renegotiate deals because they squelch on deals. All these. So is there some old stereotype in the back of his head about the post office? Like, oh, the government sucks. I once. Is it possible that he once sent a love letter and never got a return from the post office, and he's held that grudge for like 60 years? It's totally possible, right? He's a man-child. Who knows why he thinks anything? I immediately thought that our FedEx and UPS big political contributors. I don't know, right?
They are actually.
Oh, is that right? What do you got on that?
Yeah. So I'm going to give you like general numbers, especially when it comes to parties. So UPS, for instance, has a PAC. It's known as the UPS PAC, makes sense. And they've contributed millions of dollars in each election cycle. So in 2016, for instance, they spent over $2 million on political contributions, 68% of which went to Republicans. 2018. Yep, midterm elections, nearly $2.5 million, 66% of that went to Republicans. In 2020, they spent over $1,100,000 and 58% of that went to Republicans. And you see very similar numbers when it comes to FedEx. Actually, FedEx spends way more on Republicans as opposed to Democrats. In 2016, for instance, 70% of their campaign contributions went to Republicans. 2018, 67% went to Republicans. And in 2020, 54% went to Republicans so far. I'm sure those numbers will be updated later. But yeah, it seems like these private delivery services also have some interest, some incentive in helping to destroy the postal service.
So, and it might be that so-called business leaders or other connected groups who talked to Donald Trump called him and said, oh man, the post office, I hear that it's filled with deep state, because they're getting contributions from FedEx and UPS. So they tell Trump, and he's like, oh yeah, that's totally, man, the post office is the worst, right? So look, those charts that we just show you of UPS and FedEx donations perfectly describe the American political system, where private interests buy off our politicians, and they give about 2/3 of the money to Republicans, and the Republicans are the ones that push to kill the post office, and they give enough to Democrats so they can get enough Democrats to go along with it and be the party that goes, there was nothing we could do. I mean, what could we do? I know what you could do. You could fight back, and you could out them and say, hey, look at this. Why are they putting an extra $9 billion a year in obligations to the post office that no other government branch has? And if you're wondering why FedEx and UPS might want to kill the post office, because the post office delivers things for 55 cents, and the cheapest thing that FedEx and UPS deliver for is about 25 bucks. Mm-hmm. So you know how much mail the post office delivers? 142 billion pieces. Now,
and they're mandated to deliver all over the country. So they deliver in rural areas where FedEx and UPS might be less willing to do shipments.
So take 142 billion, times it by $25, and that's the profit incentive that FedEx and UPS have for killing the post office. They then bribe Republican politicians to kill the post office. And among the ways they do that is saddle them with this absurd pension request of people who haven't even been born yet. That's how insane that is. And they then demand that the government office make a profit, also weird. They then say, in the middle of an emergency where the post office is elected, no, we're not going to give you the money. In fact, we'll kill the whole recovery bill to make sure the post office doesn't get money. The core of the problem, as usual, legalized bribery.
Let's take a quick break, and we'll be right back.
Are you a politician with a ridiculous point to make? Are you in need of a petulant, outdated way to make it? Then you'll need one of my signs. Hi, I'm Simon Simonson of Simonson Signs. We'll take the stupid, over-the-top, meaningless allegory you have and put it on foam core. So maybe someone will notice your grandstanding, because this is C-SPAN, and anything that's not people milling around in front of a running vote count is almost considered moderately entertaining. The bar is low, just like our prices. We've got plenty of designs. We also brought you Mike Lee's Tauntauns. They're tons of fun. What does this have to do with the Green New Deal? About as much as this other visual aid he used of Reagan on a T-Rex. Or is that a Velociraptor? Who cares? Who the cares? No one gives a. Call us now at Simon Simonson Signs. We'll make your stupid point stupidly for money today.
Viewers had asked for an interview with the TYT lizard. Mr. Lizard. Oh, you changed colors today. Nice. I don't even know how you feel about us. Do you even like us?
Well, you guys made me this awesome house, so I'm kind of in your debt. I was found outside on the street, and you gave me a home. Granted, it was a really crappy home for a while, but then through the power of fundraising, I became a person who has a multi-level Trump-style mansion.
You do. By the way, you've never looked better, man. Normally, you're just green or just brown, but today you're in mid-lizard, right?
I'm not very smart. I'm a lizard, so I don't know how the science works. I guess this is just my mood. It's not every day that thresholds like this are broken. I'm just so excited. I can't contain my pigmentation.
And now you're showing it off.
Yep.
Yeah, I've never seen the lizard like this before.
When you choose Aspiration, you can also trust that your hard-earned money is deposited into a financial firm with a conscience. You're sending a message for change and saving yourself more than just a couple bucks along the way. With the Aspiration Spend and Save account, you'll actually pay no monthly fees. Aspiration also commits to donating 10% of every dollar of its earnings to charitable microloans for low-income Americans. And as a thank you, when you sign up with Aspiration, we'll give you a free month of TYT membership. Head to aspiration.com/TYT.
That's 300 million. That's a pretty good number. We were doing a press release on it, and I got all worked up. And I said, okay, well, that's the size of the U.S. population. You know what our next target is? The size of the entire world on the road to 6 billion. Although by the time we hit it, it'll probably be 7, maybe 8 billion.
Not a big deal. A couple of days ago on the TYT network, we passed 1 billion views.
What the hell?
What the hell?
That's a big freaking deal.
2 billion views.
What now?
Sorry.
What did we do? 2 billion?
2 billion.
They said it couldn't be done, but it was done.
We just crossed 5 billion views on YouTube.
I mean, imagine 10 years ago thinking, one day.
We looked at you like, are you nuts? Young Turks crosses 6 billion views. Young Turks has just passed another milestone, 10 billion views.
Damn.
When you sign up for NordVPN, you'll take control of your internet experience while helping support us here at TYT. NordVPN allows up to 6 connections at once and no data limits, so you can get all the content you want on any device. For a limited time, go to nordvpn.com/TYT or use the coupon TYT to get a 3-year plan for 70% off plus 1 extra month free.
Back on the Young Turks, Cenk and Anna with you guys. So we got a massive post game for you today, including the answer to E. Kawaja's YouTube Super Chat question. Thank you, all of you, for using YouTube Super Chat. But in the post game, we'll discuss why Bernie endorsed Biden so quickly, as you say. So tyt.com/join to get membership, or click the join button underneath the video on YouTube. We're also going to make more fun of Dave Rubin and his thoughts on the post office, so don't miss that. That's going to be a lot of fun. And billionaire brags about how quickly he fired people on Fox News. So a massive post game for you guys today. Also, Old School's back. Lots of reason to be a member. And I want to see if by tomorrow when we come back, if we've gotten over 100,000 on tyt.com/go. Last we checked, it was 95,000. Remember, every dollar you put in now will be matched up to 50,000. But we got to get to 50,000, otherwise it'd be an absolute shame to not utilize all that money. All right, Anna, go ahead on the next story.
All right, so after a complete radio silence on the very detailed and serious sexual assault allegations made by a former Biden staffer against Joe Biden, the New York Times has finally decided to cover the details of those allegations. We've talked about those allegations on TYT for weeks now. Tara Reade is the former Senate staffer who's brought these accusations forward. And she has now officially filed a formal police report on the incident. She did so last week. And luckily, the Times did report on it. Now, we'll get into the details and discussion as to whether or not the Times did a fair job in covering those allegations. But before we do so, there's one story that ended up developing from the Times coverage, and it has to do with what they had put out on Twitter to promote their reporting. So there was a tweet that they put up and then they later deleted it. And I'm going to read it to you and you can probably tell why they ended up deleting it. No other allegation about sexual assault surfaced in the course of our reporting, nor did any former Biden staff corroborate Reade's allegation. We find no pattern or found no pattern of sexual misconduct by Biden beyond the hugs, kisses, and touching that women previously said made them uncomfortable. So they later deleted that tweet and replaced it with, a friend said Sarah Reade told her the details of the allegation at the time, and another friend and a brother of Reade's said she told them over the years about the traumatic sexual incident involving Biden. And they also included one other tweet explaining why they deleted the initial tweet, saying we've deleted a tweet in this thread that had some imprecise language that has been changed in the story. And we'll get to the details of the story in just a minute. But Jake, I wanted to get your thoughts on the now deleted tweet.
I can't tell if they deleted that tweet because it was embarrassing to say there's no pattern of sexual misconduct except for all the other women that he hugged, kissed without permission, etc., right? Or if the Biden camp complained, hey, you know what? If you put the hugging and kissing next to the sexual misconduct, it'll seem like those 7 other cases are sexual misconduct, so don't do that. And they responded to that request from a powerful camp. So it could be either.
Well, yeah, I mean, look, just based on the reaction that the original tweet led to, I would argue that it's because of the language that makes it appear as though there was never any pattern of any sexual misconduct. There clearly is a pattern because 7 other women have accused Biden of touching them in ways that made them incredibly uncomfortable, including, Lucy Flores was one of the first to come forward. She talked about how Biden touched the back of her neck and gave her a kiss on the back of her head, obviously without permission. And so there are other examples like that. And then you get to like the actual reporting. And I'm going to be honest here and just say that my expectations, especially after this last 12 months, for the New York Times has been so low that I thought it was just going to be a total hit piece on Tara Reade. I thought they were going to trash her, smear her, and try to paint her as someone who's not credible at all. And I was actually surprised to find that that was not what they did. So this was reported by Lisa Lehrer and Sydney Ember. There were issues, in my opinion, with the way that the article was written, but I think overall they did a decent job in talking to both camps. And more importantly, they were honest in talking to some of Tara Reade's friends who she had informed at the time of that sexual misconduct. So they verified that Tara Reade had spoken to them at the time. They reported that, and I was happy about that. But in the middle of the article, there were 3 paragraphs dedicated specifically to the sexual assault allegations against Donald Trump, even though Donald Trump really has nothing to do with this story. And the reason why they did that is because they wanted to, in my opinion, downplay the allegations that Tara Reade was making relative to what Donald Trump has been accused of.
Okay, so I have a little bit different view on the article than you do, Anna. Mine is more mixed. I think there was some value in the article. First of all, I'm glad they wrote it instead of just ignoring it because it was against their beloved Joe Biden. But okay, let's note the interesting coincidence in the timing. Bernie Sanders exits the race. Okay, finally we can write about Tara Reade. Oh, we've been working on it all along. So the Washington Post media critic then asked me on Twitter, like, are you suggesting that they did that on purpose? Yeah, well, that's why I said it ahead of time. I said they would cover the story as soon as Bernie Sanders got out of the race, and that's exactly what they did. And so we're going to talk more about that in the post game. We're going to show you evidence on that. TYT.com/join to become a member and get the post game. So we'll have enough time then to discuss that. But so the timing is interesting. And when you read the story, yes, they present both sides in a sense. And that's good. I want them to do that, not because both sides are equal, but because I want them to explore all angles. Because I'm genuinely curious, did it happen or did it not happen? And I would hope that they would be, they have resources we don't have in being able to talk to so many other people about the context. And they actually did add one thing to the story, which is important. She said that she was in charge of the intern program, and then they took her off that program when she complained. Well, it turns out the New York Times did confirm that she was abruptly taken off the intern program. That's interesting, and that adds new evidence to this story. Now, the rest of it, I got to be honest, if I was a Joe Biden PR person, this is exactly how I would write it. I would wait till Bernie Sanders is out of the race, but I would do it super early in the general election so it affects the general election the least. I would write it so, hey, look, I'm being fair. I looked at Tara Reade's this and that, and I gave the allegations, but I would write it in a context, which is what this article is. But Biden's a good guy, man. Everybody that worked with him says he's a wonderful guy. And, I guess some people say she did say it at the time. But anyway, back to how wonderful Biden is and how everybody else vouches for him. And remember, Trump's a much worse guy. When you put Trump's a much worse guy into that story, which is absolutely true, by the way, right? But it seems like, again, I'm not saying that they definitely did not coordinate. They're way too sophisticated to do anything ham-handed like that. And they wouldn't. They literally wouldn't do that. But it's groupthink. So if I'm the PR person for Biden and I read that article, I think, nailed it. This is exactly how I would want it covered.
Yeah, I mean, look, that's an interesting take. I think the timing of the article is something worthy of discussion, and we'll do that in the post game. But I will say that anyone who reads this and thinks of this story in an objective way, just the objective facts, the truth is the only people who are denying this are people who are incredibly close to Joe Biden and stand to lose quite a bit if Joe Biden loses the general election. Of course, these are people who are going to deny the accusations and stick up for Biden, right? Again, they're Biden's friends. And in one case, Tara Reade said that she brought this up to the staff and that they didn't do anything about it. And so the Times went and spoke to one of the women who was allegedly informed about this. And she said that she doesn't remember it and that she would have remembered it and this didn't happen. But again, if someone accuses me of that, Cenk, I'm not going to want to fess up to it when the Times comes to me and asks me, hey, is it true that you buried a sexual assault allegation? We got to go. Let's continue the conversation in the post game. TYT.com/join to become a member. Everyone else, have a great night. We'll see you soon.
All right, back on Young Turks, Cenk and Anna with you guys in the post game. Man, we got a lot of stories for you guys, including an awesome update.
Yes. All right. So Cenk and I were discussing why the New York Times decided to delete its initial tweet on their Tara Reade story. And so Cenk had speculated that possibly there was some coordination with the Biden campaign. I speculated that it probably had to do with the fact that they looked pretty wrong in saying that there was no pattern of misconduct with Joe Biden when 7 women had accused him of sexual misconduct. And so Ryan Grimm tweeted the following while we had already gone live, which is why I hadn't seen this earlier. He said, in a fascinating interview, Dean Baguette, who's the executive editor and publisher of the New York Times, made that controversial edit in the Tara Reade story at the behest of the Biden campaign. So apparently there was some coordination, and I wanted to make sure that you guys were fully aware of it and fully informed.
Nailed it. So listen, guys, this is why I tell you guys that when you're comparing us versus mainstream media in political analysis, they are constantly catering to power. And so almost by definition, they're going to be less accurate than we are. Since we don't have to cater to that, we can give you the breadth of our political experience. And as Anna and I did, we said there's 2 possible reasons why they could have done this. And the reason that I suspected that they were influenced by the Biden campaign, and I wouldn't even call it coordination. I would just say what happens all the time, and I know this from covering politics for 25 years now, is different campaigns will complain to the press. If they don't bother complaining to us because it ain't going to happen and it ain't going to work. But at MSNBC, when I was there and afterwards, the campaigns would constantly, especially the Hillary Clinton campaign, would call them every day to put pressure on them. Don't cover it that way. Cover it this way. I'm going to tell you how to cover it. And most of the time, they would agree to that pressure and they would do as they were told. So when I saw that they took that portion out of not only the tweet, but they took it out of the story itself, where they connected the 7 other women who charged hugging, kissing, etc., without permission to the sexual misconduct. My sense was the Biden campaign would not like that. They don't like those things being in the same sentence. And if they called the New York Times, if you and I called the New York Times, this actually did happen in my campaign.
It did happen.
Right? They initially in my campaign, they were like, oh, no way. But in our case, it was a factual matter. 2 + 2 = 4, right? And they're like, nope, it doesn't equal 4. And we had to put enormous pressure on. And after days and days, they were finally like, fine, it equals 4. That's what the radio host said, I guess, right? But when the Biden campaign calls and says, I don't like the construct of that sentence, they're like, yes, sir. Sorry, sir. I'm so sorry, sir. And so that happens daily. That's why Dean admitting it, he probably felt like, duh, yeah, of course, right? Yeah. Whereas everyone else, like maybe he forgot that they're the PR that they put out to the rest of the world is, oh my God, we are not at all influenced by any of the campaigns, especially the Democratic establishment campaigns. We are totally neutral and objective. Oh, please spare me.
All right, well, let's go to the second half of that story that has to do with the prediction you made that came true. So I know you're going to love this. So over the weekend, after the New York Times had published its story on Tara Reade's allegations of sexual assault against Joe Biden, Cenk tweeted the following. Exactly as predicted, New York Times comes out with story about Tara Reade's allegations against Joe Biden right after Bernie Sanders leaves the race. They, of course, say they were working on the story all along. Funny how accurately we can predict these coincidences. And by the way, Cenk absolutely did predict it. We covered the story on April 3rd, and he made these statements.
Do you think the Republicans aren't going to bring it up in the general election? And do you think the mainstream media isn't going to talk about it 24/7 once they do? So the Republican Party, whether it's Trump or others, will make a giant deal out of this in the general election. And then the mainstream media will say, oh, an establishment Republican said something. Well, then we must cover it because they're not invisible. progressives are invisible, but establishment Republicans are real people. They're human beings. They count.
So in response to Cenk's tweet, a media critic from the Washington Post tweeted back, "Hi, Mr. Uygur, this is quite a suggestion. Do you have any evidence for it?" Cenk, go.
Well, I just show you the evidence of it. And important update on the New York Times story. After they published it, there's further reporting saying that the New York Times was getting a lot of pressure from Brad Pascrell, the campaign manager for Donald Trump, to cover the Tara Reade story. So exactly as predicted, when Bernie Sanders is in the race, you progressives don't count. Plus, it might actually help Bernie. And the New York Times has written 1,000 negative articles about Bernie. Another wild coincidence. Eric, if you're at the Washington Post, all the negative stories the Washington Post also wrote about Bernie Sanders. Also a wild coincidence that none of them covered the story while Bernie was in the race, just like we told you. As soon as he leaves the race and the Republicans pressure you a little bit, oh, we got to talk about Tara Reade. The Trump campaign is asking us to talk about it. We got to talk about Tara Reade. So, look, you guys are super predictable. It's not that you dislike progressives. It's that you have disdain for them. Like, you look at them like, obviously they're not going to win. They don't have enough power for us to care about them. And so, but on the other hand, people that are powerful, oh my God, we've got to cater to them. We've got to get access. We need this, we need that. And they're beloved, credible people. So, Eric, I don't know what other proof you need. I mean, he
is a media critic. Maybe he's taking your point of view seriously, and maybe he's planning a piece criticizing the New York Times handling of the story. Who knows? Maybe give him the benefit of the doubt.
Okay, no, but seriously, look, none of this stuff is a conspiracy, right? Mm-hmm. It's not like what happens is the Biden campaign and the Trump campaign do call the New York Times and they do try to pressure them. But it's not like they coordinate. Like, it's not like the Biden team says, okay, now New York Times, get your reporters in a room and have them type up this. No, that's not how it works, right? That's a right-wing way of thinking about the media. Or they get in a room and think, what story are we going to make up to be fake news? No, that's not how it works. That's preposterous. But do they have groupthink? Absolutely. In their groupthink in Washington, does that apply to the editors mostly, but the reporters as well, that progressives shouldn't be taken seriously? Absolutely. That progressives are radical, outside the mainstream? Absolutely. Do they ever look at the polling to see that the progressive ideology on almost every issue is actually deeply popular? Never, because it doesn't match their groupthink. And so when they get pressed from the Biden team to, for example, in that same New York Times story after the fact, to take out half a sentence because the Biden team didn't like it, do they respond to that pressure? Absolutely. In fact, their executive editor just admitted to it, as we just told you. Ryan Grimm reported on that. Do they, when Brad Pascrell and the Trump team pressure them to cover a story, do they then feel pressure to cover that story? Absolutely. So exactly as we told you, progressives are invisible, and the mainstream media has groupthink of total and utter disdain from them. And establishment Republicans and establishment Democrats are God's gift to humanity. They are legitimate, credible. You should respond to pressure from them. And you should be really careful what you say about them. But you don't have to worry about anything you say about progressives. You could say all the negative things in the world and no one's ever going to hold you accountable. And so now, look, we'll even send this video to Eric, okay? And I don't know Eric from Adam. So maybe I'd be surprised if he was a bad guy. He might look at this and go, those are interesting points. But if history holds, and again, this is not a comment about Eric Wemple at all. He hasn't written anything yet, right? I'm talking about general mainstream media. If history holds, the way that they'll write the article is, young Turks have a conspiratorial theory about how the mainstream media might be affected by establishment politicians in power. Ridiculous. Oh my God, can you imagine? So conspiratorial. No. And they almost always miss the irony of doing it again. There they are, right? Dismissing and disdain for progressives and critique, and nothing but buttressing the establishment. But super easily can be disproved by Eric writing a great piece about it, and not just based on what I said. That'd be absurd. Go talk to other people. Ask the New York Times. When did you guys have the story? When did you? And has the New York Times held stories before? Absolutely, that's a fact. James Risen said they held the story about how we had Bin Laden cornered in Tora Bora. They held it until after the 2004 election, and same with the warrantless wiretapping story. New York Times has admitted both of those things. Why? They said, they didn't want to make it political. No, you had the story, you delayed it. That, by definition, makes it a political decision on your part. In that case, those two decisions greatly helped George Bush and the Republican Party. In this case, as usual, it would hurt progressives and help the establishment Democrat.
All right, well, let's switch gears. Let's talk about someone I didn't know anything about until the weekend, and he's a goofball, so let's talk about him. So there's this guy. He's a billionaire CEO named Tilman Fertitta, and he's a restaurateur. He owns restaurants throughout the country. That's how he has accumulated his wealth. And so he's been hit by COVID-19. His businesses have been hit due to stay-at-home orders. But he just wants to let all of you know that you don't have to worry about the 45,000 employees who he has furloughed. He's actually done them a giant favor, and he's going to explain why in this next clip.
When the world shut down, Tilman, so did your businesses, from casinos to restaurants to the Rockets. How are you holding up?
I'm holding up pretty damn good, but I've got 45,000 employees out there that we've had to furlough. That is so tremendously unfortunate that we've got to get back to work as soon as we can. And these unemployment numbers of 16 million, and there's no telling what it's going to be next week, is what's so sad about this whole crisis.
How hard was that decision to lay off your employees?
You know, Brian, I went through the 87 crisis, the 2000, the 2008, and it's kind of something that you realize is you're doing your people a favor if you get them furloughed first, because they're the first to the unemployment line after the severance that you give them. And it's a trick that I learned many years ago, and that's why so many people are having a hard time now. But it's just unimaginable. We've all had to do little layoffs over the years, but to have to basically shut down your whole company, when you think about having amusement parks, aquariums, restaurants all over the world, a basketball team, casinos all over, and nothing is open. It's just, it's like a sci-fi movie that you would never believe.
So, Cenk, he has done his employees a favor because they were among the first in the unemployment line. You know, he really helped them beat everyone else to the punch.
Yeah. You know, the part we cut off is in Kilmeade's intro is when Kilmeade said right before the sentence we showed you, I don't know anybody who's been hit harder than Tilman Fertitta. So, no. Here, I know a lot of people that's been hit harder. The 16 million unemployed. The guy still has $5 billion. And that's why he's like, I'm actually doing awesome, man. Right? Yeah,
I'm doing all right.
Yeah, because you got $5 billion left. I know a ton of people that have been hit harder. Okay, anyway, so my question is, why did he go on Fox in the first place? Because you go on TV with a point, especially if you're not a political person who normally goes on. You're this random business owner and you want to go on. You're going on to make a point. Well, the main point he wanted to make was, we got to get restarted. If you notice, he said, we got to reopen things. This is crazy. And he gets it. He understands why. But boy, we got to reopen. Now, again, later in the interview, he explained, even after laying off everyone, he's losing $2 million a day. And at this rate, he might run out of money in like 300 or 400 years. So, okay. No, but seriously, when he talked about losing $2 million a day, look, the businesses are hard hit. It's true. And you might have to lay off some people. That's also true. And it's heartbreaking. But he goes on Fox to talk about, let's hurry up and get this thing started again. And plus, the second thing he went on to do is, honestly, to brag about how quickly he fired his employees. Not a thing I'd brag about.
Right, exactly. And by the way, I'm glad you mentioned how he wants to open things back up, because he was one of the individuals who was downplaying COVID-19 even in early March. Now, remember, Trump finally took action in mid-March, and Trump didn't want to take action. But here's a video of Farida talking about how COVID-19 isn't really that big of a deal. We have nothing to worry about. Take a look.
Remember, we're just getting the coronavirus test out there now. We are going to find a lot more people that have this than we think have it. But what everybody needs to remember is this is not going to kill you unless you're most likely already a sickly person, and you just got to take care of yourself. There's no reason to panic, even when they announce that another 100,000 people have it, okay? More people, we're going to find out every day, have this, but we've got to go on about our lives, okay? You're not going to die from this. You can take your rarest diseases that you get in America, and not as many people are going to die from the coronavirus as die from these.
So he's not afraid of the coronavirus, even though he should have been. And of course, he has a financial incentive in downplaying the pandemic and the virus. But one other thing that he actually is afraid of, and I just want to quickly go to the next video, is what he's about to describe in this next clip.
What's the one thing that worries you about our generation, the millennial generation?
Honestly, this is the truth, and I've been friends with all your last 4 or 5 presidents, and whoever was president, Democrat or Republican, never bothered me, because they all believed in capitalism and capitalists, and that is why our country is so great and everybody wants to come here. Let's be honest. Socialism scares the hell out of me, because you will shut people down like myself, who every day is building something, creating jobs, employing people. I am the great American dream. Anybody can do it if I can do it, because believe me, I am not the smartest guy in the room.
Well, that part I do.
Well, it is amazing how in that interview he said that socialism is what scares the hell out of him, when in the original clip that we showed you, he talked about how he did his employees a favor by furloughing them early enough so they can be first in the unemployment line. So unemployment insurance doesn't scare the hell out of him?
Unemployment insurance, correct me if I'm wrong, Anna, is provided by the government and considered socialist by some. When the government then says, hey, we're not going to let the free market take care of this, and if you don't have a job, you don't have a job, so what? No, we're going to step in and have the government provide a little assistance for you when you're unemployed. And so when Mr. Furtada goes around saying, oh my God, I'm so smart for relying on socialism, and then turns around and goes, oh, it scares the hell out of me. I mean, unless it's saving my ass, right? So let's just keep it clear on that. But I want to go back to the first video too. So if you notice what he was saying there, look, it's just going to kill the sickly people. It's not a big deal.
I know, it's amazing, right? Isn't it so incredible? Because, I mean, this is a virus that attacks your respiratory system. So is he saying that people with asthma, like, they're just sickly people? You have nothing to worry about? There are a lot of people in America with asthma and other respiratory issues.
How about old people? How about anybody? I mean, look at how flippant he is. He's like, I mean, it's just going to kill the sickly people. And you're going to let that prevent me from making a buck? What are you guys, socialists? That's the thing that scares me most of all. Not people dying, not death panels, not any of that. It's if I can't sell more hot dogs at the Rockets game. Okay, that's what scares me. And then I just want to get it right, Mr. Furtada. So is it that you were unconcerned about coronavirus, or that you were prescient and you were so concerned about coronavirus that you immediately fired all of your staff? Which one is it?
Yeah. I don't think he knows. He just wants, you're right. These types of people don't do media appearances unless they're hoping to like clean up their image or get something out of it. And in this case, he's trying to paint himself as the good guy because he got rid of 45,000 employees and told them, yeah, go be first in line, go collect unemployment. It's just pathetic. Anyway, you want to talk about Fox? There's some dramas between Fox and Trump. So yeah, that's always fun. All right. So Donald Trump has been attacking Fox again. Donald Trump loves to attack Fox when they cover him even slightly accurately, and they don't do that often. Now, one of the hosts who does cover Trump pretty accurately is Chris Wallace. He's remained principal on various issues, including his handling of COVID-19. Now, Wallace in this case was just simply conducting an interview, and apparently Trump didn't like the questions that were being asked. So let's take a look at the video, and then I'll give you the attacks that Trump is throwing in Wallace's direction.
Let's start with that New York Times report that from January on, top public health officials were warning the president about the threat from the pandemic and that he did not take action until mid-March. One, what's your reaction to the report, and how much did those lost weeks cost us? When you say be in a much better position, if we had imposed social distancing, stay at home at the end of January or in early February, would there be a dramatically smaller number of cases and deaths? In the New York Times this morning, I talked about with Dr. Inglesby that top health officials within the administration were warning the president from mid-January on about the real threat of this pandemic, and that it took weeks, in a sense, really more than a month, for President Trump to respond. How damaging do you think that is to the president?
So Trump did not like that line of questioning and went on Twitter to not only attack Chris Wallace, but this is just such textbook projection. It's incredible. So he writes the following: just watched Mike Wallace wannabe, Mike Wallace is Chris Wallace's father, just watched Mike Wallace wannabe Chris Wallace on Fox News. I am now convinced that he is even worse than Sleepy Eyes Chuck Todd of Meet the Press, please, or the people over at Deface the Nation. What the hell is happening to Fox News? It's a whole new ballgame over there.
Yeah.
So I thought about reading that. I thought about all the times Trump was probably compared to his father. And like, even though Fred Trump was disastrous and a terrible person, he was a good businessman, right? And Trump is a terrible businessman. So to him, if someone said this to Trump, it would really get under his skin, which is why he's projecting this onto Chris Wallace.
100%, Anna. Exactly what I was going to say. Like, if somebody said to me, oh, Cenk Uygur, he's just trying to be like his dad, Dogan Uygur, I'd be like, yeah, I wish. That'd be amazing. And and if I was anywhere near as good a man as my dad or as successful as my dad, I'd be thrilled, right? I would never take that as an insult. But Trump has been told his whole life, probably by his dad, that you're not anywhere near as good as me, which is very, very true. And you're a little dummy, you're sad, you baby, right? And that's why he does. That's why he says hashtag sad, hashtag baby. He used to say all that stuff. Probably gave him nicknames and to make fun of him and bullied him. That's why Trump grew up to be the monster that he is. And so Trump does the same thing. And I mean, look at this child who just never, ever grew up. And he defaced the nation. Get it? Instead of face the nation, deface the nation. God, I'm so funny, man. I got him. Okay, you're the president, brother. I mean, you're not even a talk show host. You're goofing around as a talk show host. We're having fun, right? You're the president of the United States. So those are perfectly legitimate questions by Chris Wallace, of course. And that's, of course, why he's upset.
Yeah, 100%. What makes this story a little different, because there have been other flare-ups of conflict between Trump and various Fox News hosts, but what makes this story a little different is you're finally seeing other Fox personalities rally behind one of their own and speak out against Trump. So, for instance, Jessica Huseman, who is a reporter with ProPublica, made a point on Twitter about how, oh, all the conservatives are going to support Trump and they're not going to defend Chris Wallace here. And Brit Hume actually quote tweeted that and said, I will. He's the best Sunday show host of his time and perhaps of all time. And even Jedediah Bila wrote in support of Chris Wallace, and she said, enough with the third grade name calling. Chris is doing his job. The news should not be any president's friend, ally, or buddy. If it bothered you when Obama complained about Fox News, but you're silent on this complete nonsense, then just stop. Seriously, enough. I do think it's important to note that Jedediah was tested positive for coronavirus and has been recovering at home. So she knows firsthand how serious this virus is. And it's important to do accurate coverage of it, which is what Chris Wallace was attempting to do in that segment. It's
also important to note that Jedediah was very brave in the Revolutionary War and was a great state legislator afterwards. It's a fun name for a woman in the year 2020. But anyways, it's the guy named Jane Huger. Okay, so Jedediah has coronavirus, so maybe a little personal to her. Attacking a Fox News host, she's a Fox News host, a little personal to her. And as you pointed out off air earlier in the day, so when he attacks New York Times, et cetera, as fake news, not as big a deal. You attack Fox News, whoa, hey, whoa, whoa, right? And I'll mention one other person, Brett Baer, also chimed in and defended. Oh, in fact, we have that tweet.
Yeah, let me go ahead and read it. He says, that's not true. Some of us put down the phone for Easter weekend. Chris is the best Sunday show interviewer, hands down. He's equally tough on left and right, and he's a great talent to have on your team for election coverage or any debate, a true pro. Look, and I want to, of course, this is the caveat that we share with the audience every time we do a story about Chris Wallace. Chris Wallace is a conservative. There's no question about it. So politically speaking, I disagree with Chris Wallace on quite a bit. However, I do respect him in being as fair as he can be, at least from what I've seen so far, when covering various Trump-related stories, including his coverage of the impeachment investigation, his coverage of the Russia investigation, and in this case, his coverage of how Trump has handled COVID-19.
No, I'll go further. I respect Chris Wallace probably almost more than anyone on MSNBC. I say almost because there might be one or two exceptions, but you're tested when your guy's in charge and there's legitimate critique. I'd like to think we passed that test. We criticized Obama all the time, and it cost us financially, it cost us access, it cost us a lot of things, but we did it anyway because it was the right thing to do. And it wasn't absurd criticism like Fox News did of Obama, of the wrong suit, the wrong mustard, the wrong this, that. No, signature Jones strikes, drilling in the Gulf, on and on, right? And did commentators on TV who are theoretically from the left pass that test? I've never seen them pass it. I mean, maybe a tweak here and there, but consistent critique of someone on your side, and that would mean an establishment Democrat, not a progressive, because they got tons and tons of critique of progressives, right? No, I've never seen them pass that test. And do we critique progressives all the time? Again, on our side, but we critique them. So I give you all of that as context for Chris Wallace passed the test when he was tried, and he was appropriately fair and tough on Republicans and the Trump administration. So now that I've seen him, not just under Obama, but under Trump, I do significantly respect him.
Every time you say I do, I think you're going to follow it with declare. I'm so used to you saying that.
Chris Wallace, chat. Even the folks, even Jedediah back at the club defends him.
Man, she had COVID-19, coronavirus at home, and she has kids. I think she just had a kid. That sounds pretty terrible, like really bad.
Okay, I'm going to throw in needless drama here.
Okay.
So look, Trump is a million times worse than Obama. So it's a little bit different context. It's not quite apples to oranges. It's a little apples to oranges in that sense. But would Rachel Maddow have been anywhere near as tough on Obama administration officials?
It's funny because I never really watched Rachel Maddow's show except right after Trump was inaugurated. I watched a few weeks, I would say. And it was really like 24/7 Russia. Like she didn't cover much else. And at first I was like, okay, you know, I'm learning stuff about this whole Russia thing that I didn't know before, but it got tired. And so I'm giving you that because I don't really know what her coverage on Obama was. I don't think that it was as laser focused negatively on Obama as it has been on Trump. But look, Trump is a nightmare. Like Obama had redeeming qualities, okay? Trump has none. The only redeeming quality he has is something you can enjoy later when he has no power, which is he's a goofball and he's accidentally funny, right? But it's not funny when he's in charge because people's lives are on the line.
Look, when I critiqued Obama at MSNBC when I was a host there briefly, they told me not to.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's such a good point. Like, yeah.
So if you stayed on MSNBC, that means you pretty much listen to that.
Mm. Man, yeah. So Matt Taibbi has this new book out. I started reading it over the weekend, and it's just so good. It's a continuation of manufacturing consent. And it's like, I really respect his humility because he talks about some of the mistakes that he's made in his reporting. But yeah, I mean, I think that there is a problem with, it's weird because we do so-called partisan journalism, right? Like we are clear about how we're progressives and we promote progressive ideas and candidates and all that. But we're also willing to criticize our own, including progressives, Democrats. Obviously, we're very critical of conservatives. But like, yeah, and we never get credit for this. Like we never get credit for being fair, which drives me nuts. But other, you know, and I say all other media outlets are also politically motivated, and they're not fair in their coverage. They will not call out their own, and they're considered more legitimate. They're respected. They have gravitas.
Yeah, the gravitas earned from catering to power. That's why who bestows credibility on you? The powerful. And they're not going to do that if you're challenging them. They're going to do that if you're kissing their ass. Good work. You're now credible because you're basically giving me what I want. Okay, look, there's two other fun things that we promised. So I do want to. We
gotta go though. Sorry, I'm getting the cue from Brett.
Yeah, I got you. All right, you know what? Biden and Bernie, I did a YouTube live video about it. Please check that out. Because you asked about that in the YouTube super chat. We'll probably talk about it more tomorrow in the post game. So come back for that. And can we go out with just a Rubin clip so that it's at least people can get that about the post office?
Yes. So we won't come back with any commentary, but these were the incredibly dumb comments that Dave Rubin had about the post office during his sit-down interview with Joe Rogan. It was so bad that Joe Rogan had to school him.
The government doesn't do anything good. Right. Name one problem you could possibly have in your life, Joe Rogan, that you'd be like, get the government to solve this. Do they do the post office well? No. What do they do well?
They do the post office pretty good, actually.
But guess what? If the post office closed tomorrow, it would be all right. You'd still get mail. Amazon would pick. No, it wouldn't. Amazon would pick that up.
You would have to send things through UPS. It would cost a lot more.
It wouldn't, though. Competition would start kicking in, and between UPS and FedEx and Amazon and drones and blah 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 and DHL, they'd all start. It would probably drop prices because right now we've just got this artificial thing that sits there that then allows them to price according to that. But if you drop that, why is the government in that business anymore?
You have to do some research for your grift. Like, you can't do unresearched grifting. You get what I'm saying? Like, if you're gonna go out there and say things that you don't actually believe, you have to at least like figure out what the argument is and then just regurgitate that argument. It's not that difficult. He's so lazy, Cenk. He's so lazy. I can't get over how lazy he is.
I don't know, Anna. I think that the dial of ideas has been turned to hot. Because I think there's some chance the drones could magically drop the price. You didn't think about the drones.
Competition will start kicking in. You got this thing that sits right here, and then that allows them to. What are you talking about? You know, one thing that since he mentioned Amazon, one thing that the post office does is when UPS or FedEx gets an order or they have to do a delivery to a rural part of the country, they don't want to spend their resources on delivering there, right? So what they'll do is they'll deliver the package to a big city or bigger city in whichever state that rural town is in. And then they have the post office. They'll deliver it to the post office. They'll have the post office then ship it to the rural parts of the country. And then it's just a cheaper way to do it because the post office is so affordable compared to the private shipment companies, right? And so they get to pocket the whatever's left over, the difference. Like,
no, that's amazing. It's amazing that they could say charge you $20 for delivery, or more, oftentimes way more, and then go give it to the post office, pay them 55 cents, and keep the $19.50. It's amazing. It's amazing.
Bananas.
Right. But Anna, Dave Rubin would like to counter with drones go up, prices come down. You can't explain that. Neither can he.
Man. All right, we got to go.
All right, we'll see you guys tomorrow.